I'm joined by Denis Campbell. He is the editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. He also hosts Worldview with Denis Campbell on YouTube. Check out youtube.com/Worldview Show. So Denis, we have kind of like the perfect storm of Edward Snowden NSA-related stories over the last 10 days or so. We talked about German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her reaction to finding out that President Obama appeared to have at some point known that she was being surveilled. We also have news that up to 35 other world leaders may have been under the surveillance of U.S. Intelligence. We also talked about Edward Snowden now working a tech support job while in Russia. Germany may be open to speaking with Edward Snowden. And then the latest is that there may be even more documents to come soon.
Yeah, there's so much going on in the Snowden case, and now we don't have the distraction of the government shutdown or any of the other issues. I mean, the leak of information has been consistent. It's been to the point, and it's really been very embarrassing to the United States. I was in the White House briefing room when Jay Carney went through we are not currently now, nor will we in the future
right.
answer. And of course, most of us sat there and said, okay, we seem to be missing a tense there, a verb tense there. Have we done it in the past? And of course, the answer is yes, we have. I mean, every nation spies on other nations, and the faux outrage is really kind of funny to watch because it's nothing less than what other countries have done. Indeed, Russia made headlines this morning for getting itself caught in a spying situation around the members of the G20 nations. And I think, as someone said last week, it might have even been Jon Stewart, if you were stupid enough to put a memory stick given to you by the Russian government in your gift bag into your computer, then you deserve to have all of your information erased from your computer in the first place.
Right. So then the question now is, will there be diplomatic consequences? What could possibly happen based on the upcoming data that we may be seeing? What do we know about, Edward Snowden now? He did his big release with Glenn Greenwald. He moved around, went first across the Pacific Ocean, ending up in Russia. He's now working a tech support job in Russia, but we still may be about to get much more information.
Indeed, and sources tell me, as well as others are reporting the same thing, that there is a huge trough of information about to be released regarding countries which have been helpful to the United States in everything from renditioning to furthering certain spying activities. So this could be potentially embarrassing in the Middle East, potentially embarrassing again across most of Europe as well as in South America. So, the worst is still yet to come, and I believe that this death of 1,000 cuts was perfectly timed and planned so that the right information would come out at the right time. Now, the debate that continues to rage, and interestingly, the polls have turned, at least in the United States, and they've definitely turned here in the UK, say that, not many people view him necessarily as a traitor, except those in the administration who have been most embarrassed by what he has released thus far. Now, yesterday, the news came out that there will be no clemency. Both Congress and the White House were very adamant that, this man would be tried and treated as a criminal. However, you began to see a petition circulating amongst Berlin where people were saying that because he has unveiled all of this information about spying against Angela Merkel and the German government, that perhaps the German government should provide him asylum. So it's going to be very interesting to watch because the tide is slowly turning now that there's nothing else. You can only cover a failed healthcare website for so long. People do start to begin to pay attention to other news that's out there.
Yeah, and some of the more interesting comparisons have been when people are asked both about Edward Snowden and also Chelsea Manning. And we have to remember that Chelsea Manning exposed crimes, in other words, things that were illegal at the time that they happened, whereas Edward Snowden made completely clear that things which we suspected were going on were actually going on and gave us a sense as to the scope and breadth of those, but they were not crimes. Now, the conversation, therefore, is, well, what do we do about the fact that these aren't crimes? And it's a kind of a different conversation, but I think people are aware of that. They do seem to realize that Edward Snowden did not expose crimes, but confirmed that we had a surveillance state that many suspected was there.
And indeed, the laws were set up in such a way that it made it impossible for anyone to ever reveal that this surveillance state actually existed. They
Right.
essentially made it against the law for anybody to step forward, as he has indeed done. This is much in the same way as we saw back in the 1970s with Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers. Now, they tried to bring him to trial, but nothing really happened there. And, it's a situation where I think as time goes by, more and more people are going to look at this situation and say, wait a minute, why were we doing this? And was he really wrong to release it? Well, yes, technically, he did break the law. Is he a traitor? Not likely, because, what he's done is he has started a debate. And I sort of put this debate in the same category as what Occupy. And if you want to go even further back to what they've done in Egypt with Tahrir Square overthrowing Mubarak in 18 days, once the debate is started and people are outraged by what they see as the behavior of their government, then they step forward and say, we really need to take a further look at this. So the Edward Snowden case is not over by a long shot, and I would be extremely surprised if he is ever really prosecuted. It's a lot of bluff and bluster, but what are they going to prosecute him on?
And then, of course, the backdrop to all of this is the age-old refrain of safety, right? Yes, this is going on, but it is keeping us safe. And along those lines, we found out recently that it actually was a factual lie, that whatever number was presented as the number of thwarted terror attacks or other violent attacks as a result of NSA bulk surveillance programs, we now know that the number that was presented, we can't actually say with any certainty that we could tie the lack of an attack back to the NSA surveillance. We know that those numbers were exaggerated. So there's real questions there too.
This is a real example of how the Patriot Act has been allowed to run amok. And it's allowed the creation of a surveillance state that has run amok. Literally every bit of data is now being vacuum cleaned and sorted so that they can look and perhaps run programs against to see if patterns emerge. It's not the way to go about intelligence gathering. It's a good way to make certain that people are kept in line, but it's not the way to gather intelligence. And I think people are finally coming to the realization that this is not the way to do it. And even the UK now is being called to task for its response to Snowden. They've not been, particularly forthcoming in the fact that, a number of British citizens have been spied upon as a result of this, and their reaction has been, it happens. That's not a good response going forward. This could actually be one of the many tipping points that cause this government to fall next year.
All right, Denis Campbell, editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. Denis, what's on tonight on Worldview Show?
Well, we've just returned. We took a sabbatical of about 2 to 3 weeks to sort of clear our heads and figure out what direction we wanted to take it. So we don't have anything yet for tonight. But coming up on Bookview TV, we're going to be talking to two people in Washington, D.C. That'll be tomorrow night, who met online and then wrote a book about how they really don't want people to follow their example of what to do. Michelle Talbot has done a really good job. They've got a radio show down there. I was on their show when I was in D.C., and we'll be covering their foibles and everything else about online dating in the next Bookview TV.
All right, coming up next, follow up on the police officer who shot the 13-year-old boy, your voicemails, and much more.